Please welcome to the stage Josh Sullivan, Senior Vice President with Booz Allen Hamilton and author of the best-selling book on AI and Mathematical Corporation.
All right, thanks. Good morning. Thanks for joining us bright and early to start our day on a conversation around AI and national security. You come on, and there's plenty of seats up front. For those of you standing in the back, come on down. You know, I think many of you probably read an article recently that was in The Atlantic. It was in June from Henry Kissinger on AI. Anybody read that article? You know, there was a passage in there that has stuck with me since I read that, and I think it's very relevant today. He said, quote, "Truth becomes relative. Information threatens to overwhelm wisdom." You know, with all the exciting potential of AI and a healthy dose of hype and hyperbole that's out there, I can't think of any other conversation that we really should be having except how do we actually apply this technology? How do we apply AI in national security in the age of ever more intelligent machines and the ingenious humans that drive our national security apparatus every day? And I'm joined today by two experts who are going to help us think through a lot of those topics. So first, let me introduce Sue Calwait. I've had the pleasure of knowing Sue for many years. Sue is the Director of Analysis at NGA. Welcome, Sue. Good morning.
Thanks, Josh.
And then we have Derek Strasberg, who's the Chief Digital Officer of Defense for Microsoft Corporation. So welcome, Derek.
Thanks, Josh, for having me.
Thanks for joining us. All right, so let's just get right into it. Here's my first question. Sue, maybe start with you. What is happening in AI today in national security? Can you just kind of give us the state of the art of what you're seeing and what some of the implications are?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and thanks for asking it. And I'm going to start off first by just explaining NGA stands for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, because there's many other acronyms like the National Governors Association, which we're not. As part of the intelligence community, one of our guiding pieces right now in moving forward with artificial intelligence is the Office of Director of National Intelligence Strategy for Augmenting Intelligence Using Machines, the AIM strategy. And I just wanted to share sort of the main points of that strategy, or main point of that strategy, and draw it down for then what that means to NGA, and then what we're focusing on doing, all right? So really the whole purpose behind the AIM strategy for the intelligence community is to secure and maintain our competitive information advantage. To do this for the US through focused development and implementation of artificial intelligence, augmented in machines, and automation. So what does that mean then for NGA as the responsible partner, if you will, in the intelligence and defense community for providing an information advantage through geospatial and temporal understanding? Well, for NGA, it's really around discovering the most valuable information that's hidden in volumes and volumes of data that we have accessible to us, and data that is spatially and temporally referenced. And in today's day and age, as you know, there is every single day increasing amounts of that spatially temporally referenced data. Yep. That hidden inside has indicators of activity that's going on that our customers in the national security community need to know about. So our challenge is to find the hidden meanings and create new insights that advance our understanding of the world, of activity of relevance going on in the world, and to provide that information in an actionable way to our customers. So for us, there's an aspect of time. How do we give our analysts more time to derive the insights? As well as there's the need for connecting the dots in all of that information. So two main components of AI for us. One is around efficiencies. And efficiencies has to do with creating more time, mundane tasks that can be automated. And for my team of almost 4,000 folks around the world, some of the most mundane tasks are just collecting the information, right? Cleansing the information, preparing the information before we can even begin our analysis. So using automation to help discover, find, pull together, cleanse, queue what's important, and drive us more quickly to looking at the data, looking at the information to derive the insights is critically important, particularly in the smaller timelines that we have in order to provide the actionable insights. The second is around effectiveness, and effectiveness really goes to the heart of those insights. What are the dots that need to be connected? How do we create sort of persistent understanding of behaviors and activity that our adversaries are doing right now? And that is by taking advantage of all the information, whether it is open source social media information or media information, whether it's commercial remote sensing assets or it's national technical assets, and pulling together all that information to really understand the wealth of what's going on, but drawing out the specific insights, connecting all the right dots to provide anticipatory intelligence, situational awareness, and strategic warning.
Great, thank you. Derek, maybe pass it to you. Same question. You have a broad role at Microsoft. You see national security in a very broad way. How are we actually using this technology in national security today?
No, great question. And yeah, in my role, I'm kind of dual-hatted, if you will. One is to drive strategic programs that support the national security apparatus, specifically DoD and the DoD-affiliated intelligence agencies. Activities to support those organizations inside Microsoft, and then to work with customers on strategic initiatives, similar to some of the things that Sue described. And I'd say, the challenges and the areas of focus that Sue describes are very typical of what we're seeing, frankly, everywhere, which is how do I drive mission effectiveness? And honestly, how do I just make my way through a ridiculous amount of data that is often very siloed, often, even if well understood, not necessarily well architected to make, near real time, or even in some cases very close to real time decisions. So we're seeing a lot of initiatives around just culling through data, making automated tasks that are already being done by machines, frankly, more effective. I'll give you a silly example from your house. If your refrigerator is going to tell you that the water filter needs changed every 90 days, let's make sure that it really is 90 days, right? So let's make the machines that are already doing things more effective at the things they are doing. And then ultimately, let's help the human beings who in some cases are being given overwhelming tasks like, hey, sit here and stare at this terminal for hours on end. The ability to actually stare at the computer or at the terminal for hours on end and look at the things that actually matter rather than waiting for a nanosecond for something interesting to happen, right?
Okay. So in the last 12 months or in the next 12 months, what do you think the biggest game changer is in national security for this kind of technology? What have you seen kind of in practice that is really changing how work is done in national security?
No, good question. And I actually maybe even started to answer it a little bit earlier. I think it's in the really understanding that the idea is to augment the human experience and to help the smart analysts and the smart operators and the incredibly valuable human assets that we have in the community do their jobs more effectively. So things like being able to take just a tremendous amount of information and extract entities from it, or even link entities in such a way that you can go, okay, I don't have to read through those 4,500 documents now just to find a collection of needles in the haystack. I actually found a needle. So I think things like text translation, text to speech, speech to text, the types of things that are painstaking in terms of the amount of labor that it takes just to go through, in some cases, documents that aren't even digitized to recognize whether something is of interest or not. Those are some pretty powerful technologies that I think folks are really starting to kind of embrace. I mean, we've sort of seen kind of that first wave of things around computer vision and some of the more I guess, sort of table stakes elements of AI. And I think we're starting to look at some of the other things now where we're starting to look at, again, sort of narrowing the aperture for the analyst, the operator, in some cases, just even the business decision maker, the IT decision maker, so that they have in front of them what they actually care about.
So if I could build on that with some specifics of what we're doing at NGA. In the next 12 months, we're really in the nascent stages. So the key in the next 12 months is going to be around scaling. And let me talk a little bit about where we actually are. So over the last couple of years, we've done a number of prototypes and pilots, and especially working with computer vision technologies. And one of the things that we've realized is the ability of the maturity of the technology to do change detection is a really powerful tool for us. In a strategic warning sense, we have a responsibility for many, many targets that every time a picture is taken of it, we've got to look at it. And that is hundreds of images sometimes. That takes many people, many hours, just to look to see, is there something there, activity of interest. What we found is that we've been able to apply computer vision to detect potential activity of interest. And instead of having to look at 100 images, analysts are cued to the 10 images that most likely have activity of interest. We've also then moved to being able to do some automated reporting. That is, if the algorithm detects activity of interest, rather than having the human being right away say activity of interest is occurring, to create an automated report that goes out to the community stating there's activity at this location. And then the analyst has the time to investigate what is the activity and provide some more context. These have all been sort of point, small pilots. So what we're doing now is pulling that together to really understand how do we scale. And the first step to understanding how to scale is what we're calling our pilot AAA initiative. So for us, AAA is augmentation, automation, and artificial intelligence, all those technologies. And this is focusing on a specific strategic warning in a particular area with a whole team of analysts that actually, for my organization, crosses different offices, where we're going to look at what we've learned so far, bringing that to bear, and then identify where else in the workflow and how do you start seaming those technologies together in a workflow in order to truly give time back to detect the not only activity of interest, but also starting to move to saying what those objects are.
Sue, can you help us maybe unpack a little bit this concept of automation and how automation is helping an analyst or an operator, and how you see that relative to real AI, machine learning in the future, and how you think about that whole space?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's really important that you mentioned the analyst, the human in the loop. There's no doubt in my mind that humans will always be in the loop, no matter how smart artificial intelligence gets. One, our adversaries are really smart and will change their tactics, their procedures. And so if our analysts aren't assessing whether or not the technologies are still on point with the behaviors of the adversary, or that algorithm needs to be changed, we're not doing ourselves any good. So there will always be a human in the loop. And today, with regard to machine learning, the machines need help in knowing whether they have detected the right activity or not. And so we have these pilots in place, and one of the examples that I was pointing to earlier, an early strategic warning mission, I had 4 of my analysts just focused in one very specific issue area, every day having to just look at hundreds of sites. When we started bringing in a computer vision algorithm and machine learning, we've now cut those 4 analysts down to 1. The advantage is that the one analyst is now only looking at those images where it's the highest probability. And that analyst also is continuously working with the technology to say, oh, you missed this area, or what you thought was activity of relevance really isn't. So that the computer vision algorithm is starting to understand, oh, I need to sort of adjust what I'm doing. Meantime, the other 3 analysts who had been just doing this monitoring are now able to apply their brain cells, as I like to say, to other more complex issues in the region or just other areas of interest that we haven't been able to pay attention to because we've had 4 analysts on this one issue.
Well, and I think one of the interesting things you say there, Sue, is just to kind of up-level it from just like a core national security case just for a second is something that will hit home with everybody in the last couple of weeks is some of the humanitarian and disaster response type of stuff that's happening down in the Carolinas, right? Same type of technology and algorithms could be applied just to something like that. Hey, what's the probability of this particular image and that this represents a man or a woman or a family on top of their house looking to get rescued, for example? What's the probability that this is actually a road that is, or another piece of infrastructure that is impassable now, that is preventing the reliable delivery of logistics or supplies or what have you into an area that needs relief. So a lot of these same techniques can be applied to absolutely things that are core national security, but then there are other, obviously, geospatial and defense-related missions, that are core to public safety and the citizenry that I think that are also really sort of lower risk and really very, very straightforward for applying this technology to things like unfortunately we have wildfires that break out in the West every year. Unfortunately we have hurricanes. Unfortunately we have other both man-made and natural disasters. And this is an area where we're really seeing sort of the national security apparatus and DoD in particular and some of the logistics arms over there really kind of embrace this capability too.
Well, maybe let's talk about that a little bit more. We've been photographing the Earth for many years.
Forever.
We've been, as your role in Microsoft, you probably have a lot of interactions with human behavior, and you have an entire research portfolio. How does the history of all the data that we've collected and all the touch points you have with either photographing the Earth or interacting with users in a way inform both your research agenda and what you see that Microsoft can bring into national security?
Sure. So good question. Sort of a multi-layered question as well. I mean, everybody associates us obviously with Office and the operating system. Very few folks out there, unless you really are a Microsoft fanboy for one reason or another, know that we've been doing AI for 25 plus years, and that we have hundreds of folks who spend literally their entirety of their careers at Microsoft doing research on AI and machine learning, et cetera. And we've been building that into our products for eons, frankly. I mean, whether you realize it or not, and as much as you might not like Patch Tuesday, there's actually a lot of AI that informs what happens even with something as simple and as taken for granted as something like that. But everything from Office 365 and all the search capability there, and Bing, all the way up to all the cloud services that we provide in Azure. I mean, there's a plethora of AI capability that we're delivering, not only from the cloud, but traditional on-premises stuff. Because I think that's another thing that folks realize is, or that don't realize to a large extent, is there's a lot of modernization that needs to happen to truly embrace this tech. So if we just make the assumption that everybody's starting from greenfield and here it is, take it, use it, we're kidding ourselves, not only in the industry, but as well as on the government side, because you've got in some cases legacy hardware, certainly got lots of legacy applications, and we need to sort of provide a bridge, if you will. So kind of this flexibility to not only incorporate kind of from where you are rather than making you come to us. Yep. Is really important. And then I think the other thing that's really important to realize is there is certainly a learning curve and a talent curve that needs to be recognized here. And so understanding that there's not typically in most government agencies hundreds of data scientists just sitting around waiting to be tasked is an important thing as well. So we need to embrace the fact that there's going to be a lot of what we refer to as AI developers out there who are folks that can code, folks that can build smart applications, folks who are perfectly capable of unwinding a legacy app and figuring out how to incorporate this tech in to provide some sort of mission value. But at the end of the day, they're likely not going to build you a complex algorithm. And so we need to give them tools as well. So that's really what we've been focused on, is kind of building in around the edges into our products, and then kind of providing tools that run the gamut from, hey, I'm a developer and somebody tasked me to integrate text translation into this app, to I'm a hardcore data scientist who went to insert university name here, and I'm ready to do something really complex for Sue.
Okay. And I want to talk more about talent in a minute, but we've been photographing the Earth for many years. How do you think about the history of data that you have to inform how you use some of this technology? Is that relevant to the way your analysts work?
It's both relevant and challenging. It's relevant in the sense that we're so used to collecting observations from all the imaging that's been done. And that really is our business. It's observing the world and then conveying to our customers what's important from our observations. So where we're moving and the opportunity now with artificial intelligence is being able to unlock those observations that I say are trapped in the pixels. Because as pixels, I can't do a whole lot with it other than use it as background information. But if I can unlock each of the individual observations that my eyes see and that I capture in text now into structured observations, I now have a data stream that I can match with other data streams. And an example that just came to mind to me is pictures of a rally, an image of a rally going on or a protest going on in a city square. So for a computer vision algorithm to be able to detect that there's a large mass of people in a specific area that hadn't been there before. So it detects that activity. What a human being would look at that and say, oh yes, this is a protest, this is a rally, and could provide some context having read the news of what's going on. The machine may not know that, but the machine would know the location of this activity and then be able to go search social media, where certainly there are posts about it, and connect a post in social media that describes what the activity is and has on the ground footage of it, and provide that to me as an analyst now, where I can now talk about why is this important? Why should my customers matter? What does it mean is going to happen next? Rather than having to start with our traditional way of looking at the image and doing all that upfront work. So culturally is the challenge that we're facing in moving from how images have been collected globally, how we've imaged the world globally and derived insights from it manually, to what computers can tell us, and instead of looking at the pixels first, actually look at the information that is answering key questions we have, and then only going back to the pixels where we need more context.
At the beginning, I referenced Henry Kissinger's quote about information potentially overwhelming wisdom. How do you think about this? Obviously, there's a war for talent. I think everyone who's in DC wants people who can do AI and machine learning kind of technology. Just doing that for technology's sake, is one approach. But there is this innate, especially in national security, this innate wisdom and understanding of intuition and something that's uniquely human about an operator or an analyst and a context that they have. That's not a mathematical context, but that is an understanding of the real world. How do you think about both the talent that you need, how you're going to build that talent, but what does it really mean, not just getting more of them? How do you actually apply this technology with humans, machines and humans working together in national security? Because we have not really done that before. We're doing automation, we're taking the toil and the rote work away from an analyst, but what's next after that? How does that start to crystallize at your respective organizations?
Yeah, for us, the talent piece is the center point, really, of how we enable our mission through artificial intelligence, because it is about the humans at its core. And there's two paths to that. One is around recruiting, hiring, and retaining talent that has the skill sets, the technical skill sets that artificial intelligence requires in order to build the algorithms, write the codes, work with the technology. The second, though, is making my existing workforce savvier about the technology. Because in the end, it is about humans working with the technology, but I believe it's not humans individually working with the technology, but multidisciplinary teams. And so for the most part, political science, history, geography majors need to be able to talk a little bit about technology and software code and algorithms. They need to understand what it can do for them in answering the geopolitical questions that they have. At the same time, the technical experts that we have and that we're recruiting and hiring also need to be able to talk a little bit of geopolitics. They need to be able to read The Economist and understand how that relates to their role in our mission. And so from a recruit, hire, retain, one of the things is the mission is really attracting the type of talent that we need. And then our challenge will be, how do we retain that talent by continuing to offer training and skill development opportunities and challenging problems to work?
Do you find that you're actually able to hire talent a little bit easier because instead of working for a big tech giant, sorry, maybe not Microsoft, but any other big tech giant, instead of working on making a news feed look better or optimizing ad revenue, which adds this review, that they're working on a mission that they can connect with at a human level?
So we have direct evidence of that, actually. Over the past year, we've hired 85 folks into our data core. And these are data scientists, some software development skill sets, data management skill sets, so technical people, mostly hired out of industry. And why are they coming? For the mission. They're not coming for the salary. They're really coming to have an impact on our national security, on our nation, their friends, their family, right, the communities that they live in, and knowing that they're doing something good to support it. And that's what's attracted them.
Derek, how are you all thinking about the talent agenda?
So I think it goes back to a couple different things for us. We've been pretty public in our pronouncements around responsible use of AI. Brad Smith, our president and COO, has been very much out in front advocating for different public-private partnerships. We participate in a number of industry groups just in terms of figuring out where AI fits in society. And again, very much of the mind that AI and human beings should be complementary, and AI should complement the human experience, not replace human beings. And I think that's where it gets to the talent thing, is that we have to do a few things, right? So it kind of starts, you can start with the students or you can work in reverse. It doesn't really matter. But I've got to personally have a daughter who's getting close to high school age. I'm sure there are many folks in the room who have kids that are high school, college age, or what have you. And we need to create responsible computer science programs, frankly, that aren't just teaching bits and bytes, but are also teaching the human factor of AI along with that. And these people need to be able to learn in these computer science programs about AI and the responsible use of AI, and like I said, kind of the human aspects of that as well. We're not all going to be walking around with chips in our head anytime in the near future, and I don't think that's anybody's desire. And then the other thing is and Sue mentioned it, and she made some great points on this, is sort of the current workforce, right? This is Brave New World stuff. I'm used to doing things a certain way, sitting at my terminal, following a very repeatable process. I'm a valued asset from an operator perspective or an analyst perspective. How do I get myself smart on this tech, so to speak? And so we're doing a lot of investing, not only in our customers but our partners as well as the academic community, in kind of sort of trying to shape a community, if you will, around AI, so that we are hitting not only kids that are starting to take an interest or moving towards a career in that area, but also retraining programs. I think the Air Force has a recent initiative that they've launched. In fact, just to bring it back to national security for a second, recognizing that there is certainly a dearth of AI scientists or data scientists, if you will, in the defense community. How do we cultivate those people? Whether it's bringing people in or bringing people up, to be able to perform jobs in kind of this new economy, if you will, where AI is really, kind of become embedded. And I think, just kind of one more point on the talent pool. Then, I think the other important thing is, really to kind of embrace this openness of community. Because if we're all sort of fighting for elbow room from the industry, big company perspective, to sort of turn your words back on you, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, and frankly, we're doing our public sector customers as well as our commercial customers a disservice as well.
I agree.
So we really do need to kind of cultivate just sort of a mind share for responsibility, and that starts with the people.
Sue, I want to turn to something that NGA Director Cardillo said last year, that he hoped to turn over 75% of image analysis to the AAA that you mentioned, the AI, Augmentation Automation. How do you think that's going, and are there challenges that maybe you didn't anticipate last year that you've seen as you try to roll this out in a really big way?
Yeah, it was an awesome challenge, and I took it to heart. And when we talk about turning over 75% of our imagery analysis to artificial intelligence or to AAA, I want to emphasize that we were, first of all, starting with change detection. Because in the spectrum of what computer vision can do, because that's really the technology primarily that he was referencing was computer vision, going from change detection to object identification to object classification to object contextualization, the technology is very mature on the change detection. And we've had some very successful pilots in the change detection area that are actively and operationally right now supporting specific intelligence issues. And we are now moving those into enterprise scale. So for us, one of the challenges is taking a successful pilot and moving it into the architecture at scale. And this goes, Derek, to your point around having to modernize our architecture and modernize our technology. So one of the challenges is just that, is modernizing the technology. I will say that more often than not, the question I get is my workforce, my analysts, ready for this technology? And I can tell you emphatically that any technology that's going to help cue them to where to look or provide an indicator that something of interest that they care about is in this image, they want that technology. And they're willing to accept false positives if in some way, shape, or form it starts to get time back to them to do the more interesting and more important work of the cognitive analytics. So that's where we have not yet hit 75%, but with this initiative, the AAA pilot that I talked about, and understanding where in the workflow we can bring the technology to bear, adding that to what we're learning about what does it take to scale into the architecture, the high compute platform, the cloud tools that are necessary. By the end of this year, we'll put all that together, and I think we'll have really made some significant progress towards that 75%.
Yeah, Derek, to the point about scaling, some of the environments in government are very unique, especially national security and denied environments, classified environments. What kind of investments is Microsoft making? What kind of products are you trying to drive in the AI space that is uniquely going to serve federal, maybe even uniquely national security clients?
Yeah, so good question, because there is always that portability challenge, right? Not only from the perspective of most of these customers are global in nature, so you got to be able to, have that kind of global scale and reach, but often not operating with the best of communications, and let's just leave it at that. So, where we've really kind of looked, and I'll get a little bit into the weeds on the tech here for a second, is to make sure that we have both portability at the data layer, at the model layer, and fundamentally at the, if you want to call it AI application layer as well, so that anything you can run in our cloud with perfect comms out of a building here in DC, you could run in a far-flung location of the world, in a smaller footprint, in a disconnected scenario. So really looking to containerize AI as much as possible so that, yes, your focus in some far-flung corner of the world at a State Department outpost or at a Army outpost or what have you may be different. You may be looking at the same data differently in that location of the world as you would look at it maybe back here at headquarters or somewhere else in the world. But the fact of the matter is you can use the same raw material in that situation as you would back here because the solution is completely portable. So looking to kind of cut the cord, no pun intended, on the cloud in a lot of ways, even though we love cloud at Microsoft, don't get me wrong. But we recognize that there are mission constraints around connectivity and portability that we also need to acknowledge as well. So everything we're building is ultimately designed to be a couple things. Portable, like I said. One, absolutely embrace the best of industry and open source so that, hey, if I'm an analyst, again, operating in some far-flung corner of the world and I want to apply some algorithm that isn't available natively, if you will, from Microsoft's tech, I can bring that in and still use our tools. I just have a different target algorithm that's operating off that same source data.
I want to turn now to something I want to know from both of you. What is your biggest fear, or what is keeping you awake at night around the next 18 months of this technology? It can be in any dimension, but I really want to understand, as you are driving hard and trying to apply this tech in national security, there are a lot of dimensions, a lot of ramifications to that, and I'm sure there's challenges that are keeping you up. Personally, what is occupying some of your own thoughts and keeping you up at night?
So what keeps me up at night is that we're not going to have the technology at scale in time to support our customers from the warfighter to the White House in another major crisis. We're already, quite frankly, we are fighting wars in the Mideast, in the CENTCOM area. We've been practicing, thinking hard about what would happen in the Pacific AOR. If something were to happen in the Pacific AOR, in addition to what's happening in the CENTCOM AOR, I have to use these technologies in order to support our customers. I have to be able to, in essence, double, if not triple, the capabilities of my workforce, and it has to be with the help of machines. And if a third area of interest were to then also go into crisis at the same time, that's what keeps me up at night, is not having the technology at scale to support our nation when they need us most in a multi-AOR crisis scenario.
As a citizen, I certainly worry about all of the same things. In addition, I worry a little bit about the hype curve, quite honestly. I think there's a lot of...
You think the hype is going to overwhelm the executability? The adoption?
Yes, I do. In some ways, because of some of the things that we mentioned, the relatively shallow talent pool, some of the acquisition challenges that certainly are out there, some of the legacy system modernization that, frankly, regardless of how good the tools are, just can't happen fast enough. Those are the things that will slow things down. There's no extraordinary breakouts of conflict around the world, and we take a more natural path towards adoption, obviously. I think those are probably the 2 or 3 things that really, I guess, I wouldn't say they keep me awake at night. I'm a pretty good sleeper, but at the end of the day, I think it's just the natural challenges of adopting technology that has a lot of hype on it right now is just that some of the cultural and procedural things that we already have in place need to get reformed in order to allow the tech to rise.
Let's talk about the hype a little bit. I think a lot of us talk with a lot of senior people and a lot of citizens all the time and give presentations, and the hype and hyperbole is just through the roof. And that's why I said that in the very beginning. I often say that. How are you combating some of the hype and misinformation as everyone just rushes to put the words AI in front of whatever they're already selling so they can sell more of it? but we might actually miss the inflection point and the change in the very nature of how work is done if we're too quick to rush and put AI in front of whatever we're doing, or we're too quick to say this is hype and hyperbole and it's the next big data or it's the next whatever buzzword and I'll ignore it. There's a risk on either side of that. How do you think about the adoption curve and combating some of the hype that is just, as part of any new technology?
So for us, it's about relentless focus on the mission and understanding where in the workflow and where in the mission these technologies are most relevant. And that's why this AAA initiative that I mentioned, the pilot, is so important. It's important from two perspectives. One is just recognizing the maturity of the technology to support the mission across the workflow. How mature is it? Where else can we use it? But more important to that is that my analysts are involved in that initiative, in that pilot. It is in their operational mission today, what we call Mission Now, that they're exploring, experimenting, and applying this technology, and therefore adopting its use and getting used to and understanding when we talk about the need to build your skills, your computational savvy skills, gaining a better appreciation for why and where and how that matters to their day-to-day work. Because I think for my analysts, their question is, how is my day going to change tomorrow? I don't understand it. I hear what you're talking about, automation, but nobody has really explained how my day changes. By being involved in this pilot, they're feeling, they're exploring, they're sensing how their day is changing and what skill sets they need, how to use the technology, which then is encouraging us to ask, what other technologies, what other capabilities can we bring to bear?
I think for us, it's sort of this relentless sort of realization, if you will, that we're still learning and that AI is not a silver bullet for everything. We've had to actually tamp down expectations with really large customers, to be completely candid, that this might not be the right use case for this. The technology is just not mature enough in this particular space yet to do either what you're asking of us or what you seem to be asking of us. So I think, and that goes through a lot of things even that we're doing internally with regard to looking at AI use cases from an ethics perspective even. And is this the right way to apply this technology or a set of technologies to a problem that does involve human beings as the output ultimately as well? So I think that, that's been a big thing for us over the past, I'd say about 18 months now, is really, coming to the realization that yes, we have a tremendous opportunity here, but we also have a tremendous responsibility as technology companies to advise our customers that, one, about the human aspects of things, and two, that the tech will continue to evolve. And it is not perfect, and we need to be responsible with its use.
Let's go maybe a little broader now and talk about a national level conversation. So we have other nation states, Russia and China probably would lead the pack, certainly in making substantial investments around this technology, education of their own workforce, things like that. We don't have a national AI strategy in this country yet. There have been part of the Henry Kissinger's article in The Atlantic was a call for that. There have been other calls for that. What are your thoughts and what do you see happening at a national level, maybe around the entire intelligence community initiatives, and from your view at Microsoft, both things that are happening and gaps that we may have at a national level to really be competitive as a country with some of our global adversaries?
So our nation has always had the advantage in innovation. And what I see as all the talk that's going on right now, whether it's in the press, whether it's on the Hill, wherever, is spurring the innovation. Spurring the innovation, one, because it's adding resources into the issue, right? Absolutely. And it's creating it as a primary focal point So I mentioned the AIM strategy in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and in the DoD, they've got the Joint AI Center.
Yep.
So both in the defense and intelligence community, they've drawn from the recognition of what our adversaries are doing and where they are, and the discussion of the technology and the advances that have been made, especially in narrow AI, to say we've got to do this. That discussion combined with resources is what is catalyzing now innovation and the application and use of it. I will draw that down even further, that within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, there is a board that's focused on analysis, the National Intelligence Analysis Board, the NIAB. And in their FY19 to 21 strategy now, there are 3 focus areas, one of which is AIM. So everything within the defense intelligence community draws from a strategy, right? The national security strategy into now the OD&I strategy and DoD strategy, now down into the analytic level, and then within NGA and all the other agencies, taking from that and looking at what do we need to do to develop our tradecraft and our talent and modernize our workflows to take advantage of it.
No, I probably just to echo something that Sue said. I think the number of conversations and pilots and proof of concepts and just ideas about how do I get into this in some sort of low risk way, whether it relates to logistics or supply chain reliability or optimal use of resources from a financial perspective, or whatever use case is applicable to insert defense agency name here or intelligence agency name here. Is really encouraging. To her point, the number of resources being allocated, the funding being allocated, and frankly, the talent that, quite honestly, I'm sure you may have seen it, Sue, is coming back into government to work on this type of thing is really, really, really exciting. And so I think that's a good indicator that we're getting serious about this space.
So I'm going to let you all have your say in just a minute. So we'll take a couple of questions. I have one more for them. So be thinking about if you have a question, we'll take a couple. So my last question for you all: fast forward me, 2 years, 5 years. What's the one thing that you really hope to see, to know that we have figured out or are on our way to figuring out how to make this kind of revolutionary technology work in national security? What's the one thing you hope to see?
So 5 years from now, I want to see our approach to what we call the TCPED, tasking, collection, exploitation, processing, and dissemination, turned on its head and inside out, where we have gone and asked for what data we need. I want the data to find us. I want the data to be smart enough, the technology, the machines to be smart enough to know what information, what data is most relevant to the key questions that I have, so that I can start my day informed and build on that, rather than start my day on either asking for data or just taking what has been collected and trying to figure out for myself what's important to know.
Fairly similar answer, actually, Josh. I've been doing this for a long time in the federal government and in defense specifically. And if 5 years from now, I don't have to hear another conversation about I can't make decisions despite the fact that we collect more data than you could possibly fill up a really expensive hard drive with, I would be thrilled.
That's great. Well, good. Let's transition to questions. All right, I see a number of hands. Whoever's ever running the mic can decide who goes first, because I hide my iPad from the Microsoft. Derek.
Hi, lucky number one. My name's Daniel, and the focus of the conversation today has primarily been about skilled workers. I'm really curious by what changes you think AI will make to the unskilled labor market.
Good question. You want to hit that?
Unskilled labor market.
Unskilled labor market. So I guess, again, I sort of hit some of this commentary earlier. I think the challenge for us is to honestly lift people up that are, what you would say are in the unskilled labor market at this point right now, and rather they're doing, gig type jobs or on-demand type jobs, provide skills training so that they can actually fill those types of positions. And then again, I think there is a massive opportunity for folks just coming into the workplace to kind of embrace this era of automation. There are more computer science related jobs than we can possibly fill at this point, and a shortage of workers like you wouldn't believe. We have trouble hiring them. I know the government has trouble hiring them. And, I do think that there is a tremendous opportunity, and we need to take some corporate responsibility as industry, period, to make those programs available to folks so that we do lift up the labor market in general.
Yeah, I can only echo that. So for the purpose of national security, and in particular for our agency, NGA, what we are looking for is unskilled workers to retool themselves, to add the skills that we're looking for, taking advantage of online courses, whether it's a MOOC, right? So
Yep. There's a tremendous amount of free material out there.
Absolutely. And the ability, with all the open source tools and freely available data, publicly available data, starting to test and build their skills that way, and then coming to us.
Sure. Good. Next question.
Tony Cherry, my assessment is that the IC is a decade ahead of where DoD should be when it comes to AI. One of the things that DoD is wrestling with is what goes wrong, or what is the impact if the algorithm is wrong. It's not bad refrigerator water, people die. You've been a practitioner now of that for a long time, based on your comments this morning. How is the IC, or in your case, the NGA, balancing what the AI is doing with the potential of a bad recommendation?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that, because it's going to allow me to talk about something that's really, really important to our analytic tradecraft, and it is tradecraft standards. So the 9/11 Commission identified two faults in the IC that contributed, not the cause of, but contributed to it, in essence, missing the events that unfolded, unfortunately, on 9/11. And one of those missing elements was standards, the existence of standards and the application of standards. The second was the lack of imagination, that we could imagine using airplanes, as guided missiles. In response to the lack of standards, the intelligence community went forward, and in the analysis community specifically, identified and created tradecraft standards. There's 9 tradecraft standards. And every year, every analytic member of the IC is assessed by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence against those tradecraft standards, and a report card, in essence, is created. And so within NGA, we've created a very specific program on ensuring things like quality and understanding the source of the material that we're using and citing that source and writing in clear language and providing relevancy and many other kinds of things. So, and one of the most difficult standards is the analysis of alternatives, which really gets to the imagination. The advantage that we have with machines is that machines can be very imaginative. And that can help create those alternatives that our humans need. So there will always be humans in the loop looking at the alternatives. The challenge for the humans is knowing whether or not those alternatives is truly viable. And in part, that gets to your question about, is the algorithm wrong? So we're looking back at the standards and saying, a need to have a governance process and a validation process to ensure that the tradecraft standards that our analytic rigor is based upon is built into the development of the algorithms. It is built into the methodology that the algorithms are following, the analytic methodology. It is built into what sources of data are you using and what is the intended use. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of understanding the intended use of those algorithms. Because an algorithm that is intended to determine change should not be used to warn of specific activity occurring if it wasn't intended to identify that specific activity. So that gets to the heart of embedding tradecraft.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge point, is intended use and how these algorithms evolve over time once they're fielded. Because I think that's a point folks frequently miss as well, is this does this well, so let's apply it to that as well. And that is more often than not where things start to go awry.
Well, that was a great question to end on. Derek and Sue, thank you so much. They'll have time here in the Booz Allen Innovation Tent for a little while after for more conversation, so thank you for your time this morning.